Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining our health and safety webinar. Today we're going to talk about the topic of risk assessments and then take a look at the health and safety support that's provided via the BSG Hub, which is an online information portal and some risk assessment software that's available to you as a benefit of your select membership. So what we're going to look at today, first of all, by way of introductions, my name's John. I work within the BSG sales and marketing team. We've also got Scott on the call, Scott Lynch, who's one of our team of construction sector safety advisors based in Scotland. What we're going to cover, we'll do a quick look at who BSG are. Then we'll talk about the legal framework that drives the requirement to complete risk assessments. We'll then have a look at the BSG Hub content and end with a demo of the risk assessment and method statement software that you've got access to. If you've got any questions, there should be a Q&A bar that you can see. I think it might be across the top of your screen. If you complete that, pop the question across, we'll do whatever we can to answer it. We'll probably answer them at the end, but if anything crops up that's to do with the slide that we're on or anything, Scott will interrupt and we'll cover it there and there. So a little bit of background about BSG. Like Select, we're a not-for-profit organisation. We're a membership organisation and we specialise in providing safety support to businesses that are involved in building, construction and the allied trades. We've got a board of directors which, similar to Select, is drawn from directors from our member companies. They represent the interests of our members and also get involved in the strategy, the goals, and also set the price points of our services. So the stuff that we produce is based on member company feedback and authorised by the board of directors on the member company behalf. We've got about 55 employees, and of that number, 40 are safety advisors like Scott, dotted around the country in strategic locations, delivering services to our member companies. Perhaps the key takeaways from this slide are the fact that we've got about 800 companies that directly access our services. For those businesses, we do just over 15,000 site safety inspections a year. That typically covers about 3,500 workplaces or construction sites. We're also a training provider, so we're a CITB approved training organisation. We measure the training output in terms of the number of days worth of training we deliver a year, and that hovers around 10,000 delegate days worth per annum. All of that gives us a very unique view of the UK construction sector, particularly the way it's performing in terms of health and safety, both in terms of current practice and new innovation. The sort of people that use our services, it's a complete cross-section of the construction sector and the allied trades. Tends to be small to medium-sized businesses, although we do have some large member companies, but it's predominantly small to medium-sized businesses. And very much our focus within the business is about providing practical advice and support. This map here gives you a feel for the coverage of the business. Each one of those shapes on the map represents a site where we are doing regular or repeated site safety inspections. On top of that, there'll be a whole host of other sites or transient sites where we perhaps only go 1 or 2 times to carry out safety inspections. And to make sure our service is delivered with very much a regional focus, we've divided our safety advisors into regional teams, as you can see there on the slide. Now, I said earlier, we do about 15,000 inspections a year. We obviously monitor the findings from those inspections and look at the trending. And currently, the top 5 non-compliances that we're seeing across the whole of the UK are working at height, edge protection, dust and fume management, issues around housekeeping and material storage, and then number 5, risk assessments and method statements. At this point, perhaps if I throw you across to Scott, who will just give you a little bit of an insight to get into the sort of things he finds when he's out and about on construction sites.
Thanks for that, John. Yeah, commonly one of the things that I find on site is that working at height arrangements is my particular bugbear. Before I became a health and safety advisor and health and safety career, I was a joiner and carpenter within Glasgow and Scotland. I had an accident as a tradesman, and I fell from the third story of a scaffold, pinballed all the way down. Thankfully enough, I'm lucky enough to be here, but I know in many cases that obviously wouldn't have been the case for other people. So as I say, when I find these issues on site, it's something that's quite close to my heart, and I try and deal with. But yeah, one of the common issues that we find, unfortunately, is working at height, predominantly around scaffolding or access ladders. Again, I was on a site recently in the past few weeks. It was for an electrical contractor and a large client, and they were working on a substation for a battery storage facility, and they were using aluminium ladders on a live electrical system, which is frightening to say the least. So again, it is quite common we find these things on sites. Even in this day and age, when you think, you know, we're so well educated and so well versed on the precautions to take. But yeah, we still need to be vigilant, of course. Other issues that we find commonly on sites is obviously, as many people be aware, the HSE's campaign on dust recently around face fit testing in particular. Frequently, I find that when I go on sites, people who have facial growth are wearing masks, or of course aren't wearing any respiratory protection at all. So again, it's a significant non-compliance, and from a HSE perspective, would be at least the minimum of an improvement notice. So what we're trying to do is reiterate the points to contractors to make sure that they have dust extraction or dust suppression systems in place, or again, where possible, even have dust enclosures combined with respiratory protection. Again, the point to make here, folks, is it's yourselves, or again, people you know work alongside with, that are going to be subject to these conditions, these respiratory conditions. And we want to make sure that they're not subject to anything like that at all, whether it be silica dust, wood dust, of course, which leads on to significant respiratory conditions such as even lung cancer, silicosis, etc. So we're trying to mitigate that, and with our approach on site, we try and educate people, as well as obviously pass down some guidance on what could be put in place. The other things that we find on site, particularly, are RAMs, which become generic at times. Again, some cases where I found that the RAMs reference legislation that are not even in this continent, being copied and pasted from Google, unfortunately. I was on a site fairly recently where, again, it was vague, was probably putting it politely, where again, that had no kind of clear control measures put in place, or clear measures which would indicate how an operative would go about doing the works. So it's important that when we're talking about risk assessments, that they are written for the people who are obviously going to carry out the works, where people understand what is expected of them and what controls need to be implemented to keep them safe and keep others safe as well. So yeah, those are the kind of three that I come across quite commonly on sites.
Okay, thank you, Scott. So to that point then on risk assessments, if we just have a look at the legal framework that sits behind the requirement to carry out and to document risk assessments, there are essentially really two pieces of legislation that drive it: the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 74, and then the slightly more recent Management of Health and Safety at Work Regs 1999. The Health and Safety at Work Act is actually one of the most powerful pieces of legislation that sits on the UK statute books. It can actually be amended overnight by regulation if required. And fundamentally, it makes a requirement on businesses that employ 5 or more people to have a written health and safety policy. The management regs, which, as I said, were introduced in '99, expanded on that and provided the detail around what you should contain within a health and safety policy, so what the content needs to look like, and also introduced the requirement for businesses to appoint somebody who is competent to help them manage health and safety, and brought into place the need to carry out suitable and sufficient assessment of risks within the workplace. And same as with the requirement for the health and safety policy, if you employ 5 or more people, or if you are responsible for 5 or more people, you then need to document the significant findings of your risk assessment. So I've taken this slide from, or the content here from the Health and Safety's website. It's their definition of a risk assessment, which is a careful examination of what in your work could cause harm to people so that you can weigh up whether you've taken enough precautions or should do more to prevent harm. So in reality, the process is all about understanding the hazards and risks that are created within your work environment. You then need to identify sensible and proportionate measures to help you control those risks. They do say it's not about, however, creating huge amounts of paperwork. It's all about being proportionate. And the agency actually say you're not expected to anticipate unforeseeable risks. The counterpoint to that, however, is building, construction activity, allied trades work is always going to be at the higher end of the risk scale. And very much there's this requirement, which we've got on the slide in red. If you employ or if you're responsible for 5 people or more, you need to document the significant findings. So what's a risk assessment about? It's about understanding the hazard in the work environment and then the risk. And what we mean by that, the hazard is the potential of something to cause harm. And risk is then the likelihood that that harm is realized. So in the pictures here, we've got, it's probably a silly example, but we've got a picture of a bottle of sulfuric acid. So the hazard associated with sulfuric acid is always going to be high. And in this picture at the bottom, we've got a picture of it's a training shoe where sulfuric acid has been poured onto it. So clearly it's not a good idea if sulfuric acid gets onto us as humans or gets onto our skin or if we drink it or whatever. But you may have a process where you are required to use sulfuric acid. So when it's contained in the bottle with a secure stopper, the hazard is high, but the risk of anything happening is quite low. It's going to take some other fairly catastrophic event for that bottle to shatter and for the contents to come out. At the point, however, where you decide you need to decant it, then obviously the risk magnifies. You're now at risk of ingesting the fumes or spilling the content. So it might be that when you review this product in your work environment, there is no suitable, effective alternative. So you might still need to use it, but then what the risk assessment process will ask you to do is think about controls that mitigate or reduce down the risk. So you would clearly wear gloves. You wouldn't do it freehand like this. You might do it in a controlled environment where there's fume extraction. You'd certainly make sure you've got level surface, stuff to manage spills, and you'd think about wearing chemical aprons, boots, goggles, and masks. So it doesn't say you can't decant it. You just have to think about the controls that you put into place to do it as safely as is reasonably practical for your employees or operatives.
Just to jump in there, John, one of the things that's probably most relevant to yourselves as electrical contractors or tradespeople on sites would probably be, in this case, maybe adhesives, which you'd come across, or fuel sources, depending on the type of works you're carrying out. So again, this would all come under the COSH regulations of 2002. Again, as John said, you want to make sure that you carry out a suitable and sufficient risk assessment, which gives a bit more detail in terms of how you're going to be using the substance or how it's going to be applied, the controls, how it's going to be stored, and again, what precautions will be taking place. So again, will it be extraction systems, will it be, handheld, will it be gloves, goggles, etc. It's just trying to make sure that when you're carrying out these works, you're thinking about the foreseeable risk that could take place. Again, commonly these things are something that we get complacent about on sites, or even in day-to-day uses of chemicals. We become complacent, and it's trying to make sure that we're vigilant when we're on site and making sure that we're looking after ourselves, but also the people around us who might be subject to it.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So, so summarize that slide. It's all about hazard and risk. Hazard, the potential to do harm. Risk, the likelihood that the harm is realized. There's a recommended 5-step approach to completing risk assessments. I put this slide in because when we have a look at the risk assessment software in a minute, you'll see that the software sort of takes you around these 5 steps. But in essence, you need to identify the hazard and who's at risk, so who might be affected, evaluate and prioritize the risk, decide on preventative actions or control measures, some of which might be eliminating or changing the product, other might be control measures so that you are using or carrying out the activity in a safer fashion. Put those actions into place. And then the step, which I think we see missed a lot, is the monitor and reviewing. So making sure that the risk assessment remains or continues to be appropriate for the environment that you're working in. As I say, when we have a look at the software, you'll see how the software helps to drive you through the 5 steps that are required. There's a bit of an industry developed around the types of risk assessment. I don't think we really need to worry too much about that at this stage, other than to say the software is designed to help you create all of these different categories of risk assessment. It's probably also worth saying, to the point at the bottom about specific assessments, there are certain regulations like COSH, which Scott just mentioned, the Control of Substances Hazardous to Health, and other regulations, manual handling, fire, young workers, display screen, and so on, that specifically require you to assess the risks or to create risk assessment to manage those risks. A lot of these are also built into the software, and there are templates built in to help you to manage them. Looking very briefly at method statements, we're often asked whether you need to produce method statements, and indeed, what are they? So a method statement is a document that details how you do a task safely. It's particularly for the sort of the higher risk work categories, and inevitably captures electrical or construction type activity. So the risk assessment process will tell you what risks you have and what control measures you're going to put in place. A method statement then builds on that to show how you're going to complete the task or the work in a safe manner. So you combine it with the risk, or a method statement with the risk assessments, to create a safe system of work. And the sort of content you typically see within a method statement are the management arrangements, the drawings, the plant and equipment that you're going to use, any emergency arrangements, perhaps where the nearest A&E is, and so on. All of that builds, as I say, to create this safe system of work. There is no legal requirement to produce method statements, but it's very much an expectation within the construction sector. And I'm sure a lot of you are asked for rounds if you're working for principal contractors across the sites that you're working on. There is some functionality, once again, within the hub and the software that you've got access to that enables you to create method statements. So there's a format there that you can very easily utilize, supported by advice and guidance when you come to do it. So looking now at the BSG Hub, I'll just remind you this is available to all Select members. There's no additional cost. It's very much a benefit of your Select membership. All you have to do is complete an online application form, which takes a couple of minutes, and then we'll get you set up, send you your secure logins, and you've got access to the content, which includes, there's about 200 health and safety documents, model policies and procedures, and all sorts of forms and documents that you might well find useful whilst working out on site. You also get access to our newsletters, advisory videos, any podcasts that we release, and safety alerts and updates as and when legislation or best practice changes. One of the key benefits to the hub is it's unique to BSG, but it's designed to be very, very simple to use. So there's no bells and whistles with it. It's very, very straightforward. It's curated and kept up to date by us. And as I say, it's a membership benefit as part of your Select membership. You can also download the BSG Hub app. So if you need to access any of the content on mobile devices, you can do that. And that particularly comes to play actually with the risk assessment software. So if perhaps you've created a risk assessment and then get to site and find that something has changed, you can very, very quickly update and amend the risk assessment from your phone or tablet. The risk assessment software, this was created by BSG about 4 or 5 years ago. It's unique to us. The key thing is that it includes about 120 templates that are very much specific to our sector. So it's quite a unique library of templates that you can utilize to help you manage the process or the work activities that you're involved in. The other thing with the software, I've just got this pointing at the bottom here, there are no limits on the number of documents or risk assessments that you can create. I think we're aware that there are other software providers and they cap the number of documents you can create either on a monthly or an annual basis. This is unlimited. You can store hundreds of documents in it if you want to. The Hub and the risk assessment software is supported with a dedicated helpline. This is obviously not to be confused with the advice and support that's available from Select. This helpline is about health and safety questions or health and safety advice. So if you're completing a risk assessment and you're not sure if you've got the content right, you can dial us up. You'll speak to one of our team of construction sector safety experts, people like Scott, who will give you very much practical advice and guidance and support in terms of the content that you need to put into place. So at this point, if I open up the software, now it's accessible obviously via our website. Just down here, I've opened it on this page just so you can see there's a Select Members Hub registration, which we can send you a link to afterwards. It literally takes 2 seconds to complete. Now, if I log in, I'm going to log into our test and development site. Once you've registered, it'll actually recognise obviously your business and you as the individual that's logging in. When you log in, it takes you to our standard landing page, which actually has to fit all of our member companies. So there's some information on here that will be slightly opaque for Select members because you might not have registered sites with us for site inspections. There's some quick links on the landing page. So this one will take you into our newsletter. We issue these every 2 to 3 months. They're a topical take on health and safety news, events, prosecutions, updates, changes in best practice. So it's an aggregation of articles, and it's just worth a quick flick through just to see if there's anything there that might resonate with your business. The rest of the content is accessed using this sidebar, and the site works a bit like an online filing cabinet. So if I click open BSG Intel, and most of the content is contained in this top drawer here, health and safety documentation. And here you've got a library of construction sector forms, documents, policies and procedures. These are all kept up to date. They're all written by us and kept up to date by us, so you know that you're using the current version of the truth. And to Scott's point earlier, when you download something, you know that it will be applicable to UK legislation, not something that's appropriate for Australia or Canada or whatever. Yeah, if I just open the health and safety policy section and then open up the health and safety policy, this is sort of reflective of the style of the content. So it's editable Word format. So you just download these documents and then you can edit and adjust them or to reflect the requirements of your business. With the health and safety policy, and bearing in mind the legal requirement to have a health and safety policy, about 90% of the work's been done. You just have to personalize it to your business. But it's a very robust document, and it's written to get people through things like CHAS, SMAS, and construction line. And as you can see here, we actually show you when we've obviously everything's date stamped, so you can see when we've updated or amended it. If you're running your own documents and you don't want to download ours, it's also just worth checking or tracking the changes that we're making, because you can then just simply upload those across into your content. Other stuff that's included here, we've got an environmental management system, including all these ecological information sheets. So I don't know, if you go to a site and there are bats in the roof space or whatever, this is what they look like, that's how they sleep, that's where they live, and the do's and don'ts in terms of managing them. Other content in here, and it really is sort of point and shoot, I suppose, but a whole raft of forms that you might be asked for, you might need across sites. So permits to use ladders, hot works. There's about 70 forms in that section. And then there's also a library of toolbox talks. And this is sort of typical of the way that the content here evolves based on member company feedback. We uploaded all the toolbox talks, and then a few of our member companies said it would be handy if you could pre-record those. We've got site managers or people that are not so keen to deliver them verbally. So we've done that. We've pre-recorded them. So you could literally play these off a mobile phone out on site. So that's the content that's available to you. You've also got access to our library of advisory videos and training presentations. BSG Bites are sort of relatively short presentations delivered by our team of safety advisors, once again on topics that we've been asked to prepare by our member companies. And then we've also got these slightly more lengthy presentations, which you could use once again as training videos. These tend to be about half an hour, once again on, I guess, the hot spots within the building and construction sector. Okay, so that's BSG Intel. If we have a quick look now at our risk assessment and method statement software. Now, this is also included as part of the access that you get through your select membership. If I open it up, what it does is it takes me into a landing page, which is reminding me here that I've got a couple of risk assessments that I've created historically that are due for review within the next 14 or 15 days. So to that fifth point in that sort of cycle of completion of risk assessments, you know, there's the reminder to go in and review them to make sure that they remain appropriate. The way that the software works is it feeds from a library of templates. So when we've clicked the template section, it defaults to opening on templates that your company has created. So any that you put together are in this section. And then over here, we've got the global BSG library of templates. So there's about 120 that we've created, including electrical content that you can utilize. Any that you create will be private or confidential to your business, and nobody else will see those other than you and your employees. Everybody gets access to the global templates. And there's a template builder tool over here, so that if you've got content already, perhaps in Word documents or other formats, that you'd like to load into the software to create your own library of templates, you can do so very easily. The sort of general rule of thumb here is the more of your templates that you create, exponentially, the more time that you save in the future as you create risk assessments going forward. So if I show you how the software works, just to show you how easy it is, I'm going to create what we call a task-based risk assessment, which is a risk assessment that, as the name suggests, manages a variety of tasks or activities that are taking place on site. When I open this section up, it drops me into a library of previously created risk assessments by my business. So it might be that I can repurpose one of these previous risk assessments and just edit it to make it appropriate for the new site. So once again, all about saving you time and effort. But if I create a new assessment, just to show you how easy it is, it'll ask you to give the assessment a name. So I'm going to call this Select Test 456. It asks you for the site address. It asks you twice. The reason for that is for anyone that's registered a site with us for a safety inspection, the address will be in that drop-down box. If not, you simply type the address in the second box. Think about who's at risk. So back to the 5 steps of risk assessment. And then you pick the initial hazard from the library of templates. Your templates will appear first, and then sitting beneath those are the global BSG ones. So I'm going to pick that one. So I'm going to do some electrical work in a roof void. There's been pigeons in there, and it's festooned with pigeon droppings. So I hit create. My review date in. Add in the PPE that is appropriate to the environment. Every time you hover on one of these pictograms, it will tell you what it means. That'll do me for now. If you duplicate something, dead easy to take it out. Now this is the clever bit. It's dragged through from the template library what we could reasonably foresee to be the hazard, the risk, and then some recommended or suggested control measures. So all that you need to do is then edit that to make it appropriate to your site. So all of this now is free text. You can change the words, add words, or whatever. There's a calculator here that enables you to score the severity and likelihood prior to applying your controls, which gives you an initial risk score. You've then got our suggested control measures. Once again, all of that you can alter, add to, add further controls. As you type in the box appears underneath it. And then once you've got the appropriate controls in place, you rescore the likelihood. Calculator does its thing. Hit save. And that's that element of the risk assessment completed. So you can then save that into the software. So that's now saved within the software forever and a day. And then you add your next hazard. So let's say I'm going to be working off of the mobile platform. Add that in. Now I won't work through each one of these for the sake of everybody's time. But you would just work through and edit each of these hazards in exactly the same way as I did for the pigeon dropping ones. There are some quick links, so it might be the site that you're working on. There are no overhead cables in the proximity, so you can tick that and just very simply take it out. You save that, and then you add your next hazard. And so you can start to build quite complex documents very quickly, very easily. When you've completed the risk assessment, work through all the hazards, you would save it as a PDF. So we would always say save it to your drives. And if you want to, you can print it out as well, so that there's a paper copy going to site with your site team or your operatives. Finished document looks like that. You can send us your logo so we can personalize it. Looks professional. And I think Scott will probably attest they're a lot easier to follow than some of the documents that he sees across the construction sites on a daily basis. The beauty of doing it on the task-based functionality is you can group multiple hazards onto the one document, and then people on site only have to sign off against the one document. Okay. So that's the risk assessment software. You've also got access to some software that helps you to create method statements. Once again, when you open it up, it will take you into a library of previously created method statements, or you can create a new one. There is little pre-population here. What this is a format that's robust. It's easy to use. As I say, once you started to utilize it and create them, you can start to then repurpose them for the next job or the next site. And remember, this is supported with access to advice. So if you're not sure about some of the content, you can pick up the phone and talk to us, and we'll steer you through it. And then the final thing that I was just going to show you today is the cost assessment functionality. So this is all about managing substances that are hazardous to health. It works in exactly the same way as you saw for the other risk assessments. It takes you into a library of previously created assessments, which you can repurpose if you need to. But then if you want to create a new risk assessment, similar in format, slightly different layout, format's the same. And there's a load of kind of pre-population in here with some of the commonly found substances to help you through the process. So and obviously you'd be working from manufacturer's data sheets, which you can drop in. The data sheets will also tell you what hazard symbols to add in, and also the hazard statements and the precaution statements. These are all loaded in as well, just to help you with the process. So that's a very, very quick tour of the functionality. I think at this point we'll stop looking at the software and go back to the presentation. And I think the next point is any questions or anything that anybody needed to ask us? I don't know if anything has come through, Scott, but I know that when we were talking about this earlier, we thought that we would share a couple of the questions that we're frequently asked when we're out and about. And there were two that always come across when I'm talking to people. The one is around whether I only directly employ a couple of people. Do I need to prepare risk assessments, method statements, and do I need a health and safety policy? And then the other one, I guess, is around the sort of issues you see when you're actually out on site.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, predominantly things that I come across on site, as I say, we kind of highlighted earlier on, was just some of the topics really. But generally, the questions that I normally get asked are quite similar actually. A lot of them are actually around the kind of systems of health and safety management and how we can implement procedures across the site and obviously have a safe working practice for people, particularly in the electrical trade. I tend to find that a lot of people who actually are coming to me are small businesses who are maybe just finding themselves within their kind of field, if you like, and getting started within the industry as a company and looking for a bit of a steer in terms of the help and support that they need in terms of health and safety management. And that's where I usually come across and try and be a guide, so to speak, in health and safety on site, because I'm very conscious, as most people are aware, that when you go onto site as a health and safety professional, you're not always everyone's favourite person to see. But as I say, if we can offer some advice while we're there and a bit of guidance, the aim is to make sure everyone goes home safe at night. So it is no problem at all to be able to share knowledge wherever I can. And if I don't have it, then I can certainly try and find it for you or steer people in that right direction. So yeah, frequent questions I commonly find are actually one I had today was around face fit testing, around which we talked about dust management earlier on, and the need for face fit testing as a requirement where we're wearing tight fitting RPE. So it's trying to make sure that people are aware of their responsibilities as employers, but also as their responsibilities in terms of employees as well, where their company or organisation have obviously put them through training, provided PPE to them to make sure so they do the task safely, but obviously commonly place not being worn, and you're trying to reiterate the points that it's for their benefit. It's to make sure that obviously they're not inhaling respirable or inhalable dust, whatever form that may be, whether it be silica dust, wood dust, etc. But trying to make sure that they're aware of their legal responsibility as well under the Health and Safety Work Act in Section 7 for employees. So yeah, it's a common thing I tend to find on site where there's just maybe a lack of understanding of the approach that people need to take for themselves. Oh, I've got a question here. So the question we've got here is, do you offer the option to support with creating bespoke RAMs? Also, what are the costs to become a competent advisor? Costs vary depending on, of course, what type of arrangements you've got in place, and what type of works you're carrying out at the time. As you say, it could be a small organisation, a large organisation, multiple sites across the country, or as I say, it could be a small contractor just getting set up and need that kind of initial support from either myself or one of my colleagues. So that varies. But I suppose John would probably be in a better position to answer that, depending on, again, more specific information.
Yeah, we'd need to know that, but I think you answered it very fairly, actually, Scott. So it's linked to the size of the business. All of our direct costs are advertised on our website. And like Select, we're a not-for-profit organisation, so all we're trying to do is cover the costs of administrating our business. So the actual membership costs are typically modest. The competent advice issue is something actually that we're sort of talking with Select about at the moment as well. So yeah.
And in terms of bespoke RAMs, that's something, obviously, as I say, myself or my colleagues can help with, whether it be, obviously, as I say, myself or the colleagues in the head office, or again, one of my other colleagues around the country. We can certainly help and provide advice on how you can build your risk assessments, method statements to be bespoke for certain types of works that you're carrying out. on site, or as I say, within a particular aspect of the industry. So that's not a problem at all as well. That's no problem in terms of trying to offer support. The other things that I commonly come across at the moment, actually, and it's maybe poignant timing with the HSE's campaign, or now campaign on manual handling, is poor manual handling technique, which I frequently quite come across on sites. As we're probably all aware, in construction industry, there's this perceived, I suppose, bravado. There's often been a case, or a kind of machoism, where people feel the need to demonstrate their, I don't know, manliness or strength, whatever it may be, and be able to do things that put themselves at risk. And the point is that we come on site and try and offer advice and try and steer people in the right direction. As I say, I'm 6'4". As I was saying with my my accident, I have hereditary a long-term back problem now, and of course trying to highlight that the consequences of that to people is something that I try and do on site frequently, because manual handling is probably the key aspect where people will receive injuries, predominantly back injuries in our industry. So what I try and do is I try and give a kind of clear indication of use of manual handling aids, advice, and where people can obviously look to review the process of manual handling, whether it be eliminating it or try and get stuff done before it's obviously been brought to site, whether it be cut down or, you know, brought to size and scale, so to speak. But yeah, for obviously yourselves in terms of an electrical trade, one thing that always strikes me is the movement and handling of cable drums, which of course, depending on the size, can vary in weight significantly. So it's about being conscious of how the body movement is, and of course the placement of certain limbs as well, because of course, you know yourselves, carrying out these kind of tasks can lead to significant injuries, particularly on the smaller limbs, fingers, toes, etc. And it's just being conscious about the placement and the communication with others. I've been on sites before, as I say, as a tradesman, where we've went to move things, and an individual's dislocated the shoulder or ruptured the shoulder because he wasn't ready to lift. It was simple things. Again, it was a team lifting exercise that could have been so easily done with a bit more coordination. But of course, instead of going on, it's probably the classic one, instead of going on 3, I think he went, he thought he was going on 4. So, which these things, I suppose, are quite easily to happen on site. But it's just being conscious, as I say, where we can offer advice and support, and of course, training where necessary, we will do that. And if need be, come to site to offer that support.
Yeah, there's guidance in terms of manual handling contained within the hub. There's also manual handling template within the risk assessment software. The other thing I was going to just quickly ask you, the HSE's campaign around manual handling started at the beginning of September. Am I right? Is it running for 2 months or longer?
Yeah, it's starting off at 2 months just now, John. So
Yeah.
of course, it's one of their fixes at the moment, or focuses rather, on sites. But of course, as you know yourself with the HSE, it's a wide and varied approach depending on what it is you're coming across at the time and the type of works that you're coming across at the time. So of course, it's something to be conscious of. But as an industry, I think that's something we need to get better at, and develop more and be more conscious about the body movement and the ergonomics of completing these tasks. As I say, it's best will in the world we can design all these things out, but in quite often terms and practicalities, that's not the case, and we have to look at measures and how we can obviously allow people to work in a tight environment or an enclosed environment safely though. And it's trying to make sure that advice and support's there for the contractors, and obviously from ourselves where need be. So yeah, that's one of the things I quite commonly come across on site.
Okay, thank you, Scott. I think we've probably run pretty much to our time limit at this stage. So at this point, we'll thank you all for attending. We hope you found it of value. If you do have any further questions, or you are interested in getting access to the hub and the risk assessment software, either contact us direct or contact your select representative, and we'll show you how to arrange to get onto the access to and onto the software. But thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Scott, for your time. And
Thank you.
we hope you found it of value.